What has Kamala Harris done for Black people? Today I'm going to tell you, but first let's talk about this edited clip that's been flying around the internet.
So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit Black people. No.
That clip is from an interview I did with Kamala Harris 5 years ago in 2019 when she was first running for president in the Democratic primary, before she became Joe Biden's VP. At that time, many Democratic presidential candidates were being asked if they supported reparations, and so TheGrio asked to see where Harris stood. The first clip you just saw is an edited down version of a much longer answer that Kamala Harris gave to our reparations question. Here's her full response, the only response TheGrio has ever published. Watch to the end.
We have disparities around housing. We have disparities around education. We have disparities around income. And we have to recognize that everybody did not start out on an equal footing in this country. And in particular, Black people have not. And so we have got to recognize that and do something about that and give folks a lift up. That's why, for example, I'm proposing the LIFT Act. Give people who are making $100,000 or less as a family a tax credit, which will benefit and uplift 60% of Black families who are in poverty.
So by default, it affects Black families, but there's not a particular policy for African Americans that you would explore.
But no, if you look at the reality of who will benefit from certain policies, when you take into account that they're not starting at the same place and they're not starting on equal footing, it will directly benefit Black children, Black families, Black homeowners, because the disparities are so significant. So if we focus on the specific issues that have resulted in the greatest disparities, and we understand that that's part of why we're doing it. Listen, the reality also is this: any policy that will benefit Black people will benefit all of society. Let's be clear about that. Let's really be clear about that. So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit Black people. No, because whatever benefits that Black family will benefit that community and society as a whole and the country. Right?
As you saw in the video, my follow-up question to Kamala Harris was whether she believed in an explicit reparations policy for Black Americans. Harris's answer on reparations wasn't a yes or no, but rather an approach that sought to help Black people through tackling issues that impacted us at greater levels, like child poverty. Harris's argument was that policies like a child tax credit don't only benefit Black people, but can benefit all of America at the same time, even if more Black people are impacted. It's an approach not everyone agrees with, especially reparations advocates who believe reparations is a clear commitment to addressing the moral sin of slavery. But Kamala Harris didn't say she wouldn't do anything at all, ever, to benefit Black people. And she did say in a separate interview that she supported studying reparations. However, in the age of social media, that one line about not only benefiting Black people was clipped by Kamala's critics and political opponents, and it spread like wildfire. We did an interview with you last year where we talked about some of these race-focused policies in which I asked about reparations, and you mentioned the LIFT Act. You said that basically this is something that would benefit everyone. Some people took that with offense. Do you think you were misunderstood? Do you regret saying that? I'm just interested in your reaction to that because I think people may have interpreted that.
I don't remember the exact words, but I will tell you where I am and where I've always been.
Yeah.
There are very specific issues that impact Black people in America, which we know have historical context, and the history goes back to the 400 years. And I've always worked on addressing that, and I will continue to work on addressing it. It is why I'm proposing the Justice and Policing Act, knowing that Black men in particular are multiple times more likely to be killed at the hands of a police officer.
So why didn't Kamala Harris just say yes or no on the reparations question? Well, take one look at what happened when she said she would support studying reparations in her recent interview with Charlemagne the God.
On the point of reparations, it has to be studied. There's no question about that. And I've been very clear about that position.
This wasn't news per se. Harris has for years supported H.R. 40, a bill to study reparations. But just by saying she supported it, Donald Trump's war room and Republican opponents ripped Kamala Harris as a radical and used the clip to try to say voters should not vote for her. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. We should also note that Donald Trump's policies do not include any explicit support for reparations. But let's get to the core of the question. What has Kamala Harris done to benefit Black people during her time in public office? We can start with her time as senator. Kamala Harris co-sponsored the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill, which makes lynching a federal hate crime. In 2020, she introduced the COVID-19 Bias and Anti-Racism Training Act to address how Black people were disproportionately dying from COVID, and her bill set aside $200 million to address racism and bias in medicine. It was a bill she was actually criticized for because it prioritized the interests of Black people and people of color. Kamala Harris also fought against high Black maternal mortality rates and introduced the Black Maternal Health Caucus, which included millions of dollars for community organizations helping Black mothers and a push to collect data on the issue of Black women's maternal health. And when she became vice president, Kamala Harris continued this initiative with the first federal maternal health day of action at the White House. We can keep it going. In 2023, Kamala Harris introduced a plan to address racism in housing appraisals, which were resulting in Black people's homes being valued at lower rates than white people's homes. Harris also led a massive financial investment in HBCUs, lots and lots of money, calling out that many HBCUs were underfunded. Harris worked with Joe Biden to allocate $2.5 billion to small businesses, specifically for underserved communities like Black entrepreneurs. And Kamala Harris worked with Joe Biden to allocate $185 million for the Reconnecting Communities pilot, which tore down bridges that segregated communities and created barriers for Black people. These are just some of the many initiatives that Kamala Harris led and supported that benefited Black people, not to mention more recent campaign promises like Harris's Opportunity Agenda for Black Men, which would give $20,000 in forgivable loans for starting a business and supports job pathways such as becoming a school leader or a teacher, all for Black men. So in summary, there is plenty of reporting that gives a clear look at Kamala Harris's record with the Black community. That's if people want it. And no, Kamala Harris did not say yes or no to the reparations question, but she also didn't say she wouldn't do anything at all for Black people. She said anything that benefits Black people benefits all of Black America. Your job as media consumers is to decide how you feel about her answers, both then and now. And the job of us, the press, particularly the Black press, is to ask important questions pertaining to Black people and keeping you informed with important context, which can be really hard to do in an era of short attention spans and social media disinformation. So if you found this explainer helpful, share it and stick with TheGrio for the political news you need to know and can trust. I'm Natasha S. Alford for TheGrio.